Well, the brain thrives on ketones. My own lab, we've published reports documenting how when a person's in ketosis, we actually had people, and we were pulling fat biopsies from their belly, little pieces of fat, taking it to my lab and testing the metabolic rate. The metabolic rate went up 3 times.
As soon as they're in ketosis?
As soon as they're in ketosis. The fat tissue just starts, it basically signals when ketones are up, insulin's down, it's sort of party time with metabolism. It's let's just get moving stuff. Metabolic rate goes up, autophagy turns on, things.
That quickly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so how would you put someone in a state of ketosis with a drink?
Yeah, so
how do you do that?
There are multiple different, now ketones have become so obviously beneficial. It increases metabolic rate. It helps people physically perform better. Race car drivers take it. Tour de France athletes take it. Cross-country athletes take it. It's a viable fuel. So as ketones have become more and more accepted for all their benefits, there's been a bit of a race to say, all right, well, how can we do this best? And there are multiple different versions, from the lesser effective but much cheaper things called ketone salts. Then you go through the ketone esters, and then you get the bioidentical ketones. And they're all of kind of varying efficacy. As they get more effective, the price goes up. But I'll say, having seen my beloved Baba, my grandma up in Alberta, die from Alzheimer's disease, it is so terrifying that one of the reasons I adhere to my own low carbohydrate diet is because I want to keep my brain as healthy as possible.
Yeah.
The fact that I stay lean and healthy, well, that's just a plus. Even my fear of cancer. Cancer cells don't use ketones, they use glucose. And so all the more reason to keep my glucose in check.
And so with regards to that specifically, so are there studies indicating a decrease in the rate of cancer propagation on zero-carb diets?
Yeah.
And are they case studies?
So that's a really good question. And I'm going to respect how you framed it, which is, can you prevent the cancer? There's no paper on that. What there are papers on is looking at untreatable, particularly brain tumors. This is where most of the research is at the moment. At Boston University, they are absolutely leading the charge on this. One of the most effective therapies they're doing is putting them into deep ketosis.
If they have an inoperable brain tumor.
And it can take an inoperable brain tumor and not only stop it in its tracks, but literally start to shrink it.
And is the shrinkage a consequence of autophagy?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So coming back to a topic you mentioned earlier, certainly it's part of autophagy and probably just good old-fashioned necrosis. You simply are dying because you can't survive. Cancer cells will metabolize. They rely on glucose as their main fuel. Because it's a quick burning fuel.
Propagate rapidly. So they're more dependent on glucose than ordinary cells.
And they don't want to have to rely on blood flow, where they basically are growing so quick that they outpace the blood flow. And glucose doesn't need oxygen to burn. It can be fermented. But just to really elaborate how clever this area of research is, this group at Boston, they took a tumor cell. And the whole theory of cancer is that it's genes, it's from your nucleus. It's a nuclear genetic disease. And yet they took the nucleus from a tumor cell and put it into a healthy cell, and the cell was totally normal. It didn't do anything. They literally transplanted the genetics. Now, what they also did was take the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. That's where you're burning the ketones and the fats. Then they put the mitochondria from the tumor cell into a healthy cell. It had cancer. It became a cancer cell. So they're changing the entire paradigm of cancer, saying that it's not a genetic
So are the cells adapted to glucose metabolism? Cancer cells adapted to glucose metabolism?
And if you force them to rely on something other than glucose, they die. It's incompatible with their rate of growth, and they can't sustain it. So ketones are at the front.
See, I've also read that if you're undergoing radiation therapy, for example, or what's the chemical treatment?
Chemotherapy. Yeah.
More specifically, chemotherapy, that if you put yourself into ketosis, you have much less, you have much modified negative reaction to the chemotherapy.
Yep. In fact, that
much
is
less.
The negative side effects. You think about chemotherapy, it really is a matter of the oncologist, the cancer physician saying, how much poison can I give you? So that enough of you survives, but I kill what we don't want, namely the cancer. So chemotherapy is is a miserable way to go. And I have my own strong thoughts on the very field of oncology and the use of chemotherapeutics. I think by and large, most of them are not worth
trouble.
Not worth the trouble.
Right.
You maybe will live another week, if anything, and you will have bankrupted your entire family doing so. But
Right.
But even back to the glioblastoma, the inoperable brain tumor area, part of what they've shown is that ketogenic diets can act as a kind of adjuvant therapy.
Right.
That the actual amount of dose of the chemotherapy required
much lower.
is much, much lower.
Right,
and
because you're
far
already
more effective.
compromising the tissue.
You're already killing them.
Right.
Now you're just pushing them over the edge. I mean, this is so much. This is why I beat this drum so loudly. That you look at, like, we at the end of this conversation, one of my great hopes is that someone listening opens up their morning medicine cabinet and they take out their 2 medications for their diabetes. They take out their medication for their blood pressure. They take out their medication for their PCOS or their erectile dysfunction, thinking because there's different pills, these are different problems.
Right.
And yet if they start to institute just the simplest, albeit not easy, but the simplest lifestyle changes to start correcting the glucose, correcting the insulin, they'll find, much to their delight, that those medications can just stay in the medicine cabinet.
Right.
They're correcting their problem one at a time.